remember the exact sound my phone made when the message came in, a soft chime that felt too gentle for what it carried. And my first thought was that something was wrong with my baby. I was standing in the kitchen of my apartment in Astoria, Queens, barefoot on cold tiles, staring at a bottle that had been sitting out too long, when my mother-in-law wrote, "You look exhausted. Let me take Oliver for the weekend, so you can finally rest." I hated that my chest tightened at the word rest, hated that a small part of me wanted to say yes before I even finished reading, because wanting rest felt like admitting failure, and I had been trying very hard not to fail at being a mother. Oliver was 7 months old then, still smelling like milk and soap, still curling his fingers around mine like he was afraid I might disappear. And I told myself that good mothers did not hand their babies over just because they were tired. I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that sits behind your eyes and makes you forget words mid-sentence, the kind that makes you stand in the shower and realize you have been staring at the wall for 10 minutes without moving. My husband David said it was fine, that his mom just wanted to help, that she raised 2 kids and knew what she was doing, and he said it with that calm confidence that always made me feel dramatic for worrying. I told myself that saying no would make me look ungrateful, and saying yes would make me look weak, and somehow I chose the option that felt quieter. The first weekend she took Oliver, I cried for 3 hours straight after they left, then slept for 14 hours, then woke up ashamed of how good it felt. She lived in a large house in Westchester, with a manicured lawn and framed family photos lining the hallway, photos where David looked like a child who had never known hunger or fear. Photos where his mother Margaret stood behind him with her hands on his shoulders, like she was presenting a finished product. She sent pictures constantly. Oliver in a new onesie. Oliver on a plush blanket I had never seen before. Oliver smiling wide like he belonged there, and each photo made me feel smaller. She started offering more often, every other weekend, sometimes during the week, always phrased as concern for me. "You need time to be yourself again. You look pale lately. A baby needs a calm mother." The last one stayed with me. A baby needs a calm mother, because I was not calm. I was anxious and second-guessing every decision, Googling normal baby behavior at 3 in the morning, wondering if everyone else knew something I did not. I noticed small things at first. Oliver coming back with his nails trimmed in a way I never did, his hair smelling different, a faint scent of something clinical, not perfume, more like disinfectant. Once, while unpacking his diaper bag, I found a tiny clear plastic sleeve, empty, like something sterile had been inside it. And when I asked Margaret about it, she laughed lightly and said it must have been part of a toy. Babies chew everything. I wanted to believe her because the alternative made me feel paranoid, and paranoia felt like another mark against me. Another reason someone might think I was not fit. David never questioned her, never asked why she insisted on keeping Oliver overnight instead of just visiting, never noticed the way she corrected me when I said things like, "I think he is teething," or "I am trying a new feeding schedule." She would smile and say, "We will see," or "Babies don't work like that," and then she would look at David, not at me, and he would nod. I told myself it was normal, that families had dynamics, that maybe I was sensitive because I did not have my own mother around. She had died years earlier, and there was no one on my side of the room to counterbalance Margaret's certainty. The day everything cracked open was a Tuesday afternoon, rain streaking down the windows, Oliver napping in his crib. When David came home early, his face pale in a way I had never seen. He sat at the kitchen table without taking off his jacket, his phone in his hand like it was heavy, and he asked me to sit down, which immediately made my heart start racing. I thought someone had died. Instead, he said, "My mother wants to talk to you about something," and when I asked what, he looked at the floor and said it would be better if she explained. That was when I felt fear. Real fear. The kind that sinks into your stomach and stays there. And I realized how little control I had over what happened when my child was not with me. Margaret arrived an hour later, perfectly composed, hair neat, coat pressed, as if she were coming to a business meeting, not to drop a bomb into my life. She sat across from me, folded her hands and said, "I did something because I care about Oliver's future." I remember the way the clock ticked on the wall, the way Oliver stirred in his crib down the hall, unaware that something irreversible was unfolding around him. She said she had concerns about genetics, about stability, about whether Oliver was truly David's, and when she said that last part, she finally looked directly at me. I felt heat rush to my face, humiliation burning through me, and I said that was ridiculous, that I had never been unfaithful, that this conversation was inappropriate. She did not argue. She simply slid a folder across the table, thin and beige, like the kind you get at a doctor's office. Inside were papers, charts, percentages, my son's name typed neatly at the top, and words I never expected to see associated with him: DNA analysis, maternal lineage, paternity confirmation. My hands started shaking so badly I had to put the papers down, and I asked her how she got his DNA. She said it casually, like it was obvious. Babies shed everything: hair, saliva, skin, and when you spend enough time with them, it is not difficult. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in, and I realized that every weekend, every overnight stay, every insistence on alone time had been part of something I never consented to. I looked at David then, really looked at him, and asked if he knew. He did not answer right away, and that pause told me everything before he even spoke. He said he thought it would put her mind at ease, that she was just worried, that he did not want conflict, and that he did not think it would hurt anyone. I felt something inside me go quiet, not explode, not shatter, just go silent, like a door closing. Margaret went on talking, about results, about confirmation, about how relieved she was to know Oliver was biologically David's, as if that was the only thing that mattered, as if the violation itself was a footnote. She said she only wanted to help, that as a grandmother it was her right to ensure the family line, and when she said family line, she placed emphasis on the words in a way that made it clear she did not include me. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked down the hall to Oliver's room, where he was awake now, kicking his feet, smiling when he saw me like nothing in the world had changed. I picked him up and pressed my face into his neck, breathing him in, and for the first time since he was born, I felt a sharp, protective anger that cut through all my self-doubt. Behind me, I could hear their voices, muffled but tense, David asking his mother to calm down, Margaret insisting that I was overreacting, that I should be grateful. I went back into the kitchen holding Oliver, and I told her she would not be taking him again, not for a weekend, not for an hour, and the look on her face shifted from polite concern to something colder. She said we would discuss it when emotions settled, and that was when I realized she still believed she had a say. David tried to smooth things over, tried to say we could set boundaries, that it did not have to be all or nothing. And I saw in that moment how deeply he had been trained to avoid disappointing her, even at the cost of me. That night, after Margaret left, I did not sleep. I sat in the dark watching Oliver breathe, replaying every moment I had doubted myself, every time I had accepted help that came with strings attached. I thought about trust, about how easily it can be reframed as naivety, about how motherhood had already stripped me raw, and how this had gone straight for the places that hurt most. In the days that followed, messages poured in, Margaret saying she missed Oliver, that she did not understand why I was shutting her out, David asking me to be patient, to consider his position, to not make him choose. But he had already chosen quietly, when he said yes without telling me, when he allowed someone else to take pieces of our child in secret. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer, not because I wanted a fight, but because I needed to understand my rights, because I needed to know where the ground beneath me actually was. I started documenting everything: dates, messages, photos, building a record the way someone builds a lifeline, carefully and deliberately. David watched all of this with growing panic, asking if I was planning to leave, and I told him I did not know, which was the truth, because trust once broken does not come back on command. The hardest part was not the betrayal itself, but the way it reframed my entire experience of early motherhood, turning moments I had thought were kindness into evidence of scrutiny, of judgment, of a test I never agreed to take. I realized how often I had tried to prove myself without knowing it, how often I had adjusted my behavior to appear calmer, more competent, more worthy, and how exhausting that had been. Margaret sent one final message that week, saying she hoped I would come to my senses for the sake of the family, and for the first time I did not feel the urge to explain myself. I blocked her number. David said that was extreme, that she was still his mother, and I told him that Oliver was my son, and that protecting him meant protecting myself too. The apartment felt different after that, quieter, but heavier, like something had shifted permanently, and I did not know yet what shape my life would take next. What I did know was that motherhood had taught me something brutal and necessary, that love without boundaries is an open door, and that sometimes the most dangerous threats arrive wrapped in concern. This was only the beginning of what we would have to confront: the legal conversations, the family fractures, the choices David would eventually have to make, and the ones I was already making quietly on my own. But in that moment, holding Oliver as the rain finally stopped outside, I understood that rest had never been what I needed. I needed agency, and I was done giving it away. That night, after David fell asleep on the couch with his phone still in his hand, I stood alone in the bathroom and studied my own reflection, like I was seeing a stranger. My eyes looked older, sharper somehow, like they had learned something they couldn't unlearn. I tried to remember the woman I had been before Oliver, before motherhood became a performance measured by calmness and gratitude, and I couldn't quite reach her. I realized how carefully Margaret had framed everything, how none of it had sounded like accusation, how every sentence had been wrapped in concern, in tradition, in what was supposedly best for the child. She had never once raised her voice, never once said anything overtly cruel, and that made it harder to explain, harder to point to the exact moment where help became control. That was the part that scared me the most. In the quiet hours before dawn, I replayed conversations I had brushed off, moments where she had asked oddly specific questions about my pregnancy, my family history, my health. At the time, I had thought she was just interested, maybe a little intrusive in the way some people are. Now those memories rearranged themselves into something colder, more intentional. I thought about how easily she had accessed Oliver, how no one had questioned her authority because she spoke with certainty, because she had credentials I did not, experience, age, confidence. I wondered how many other women had been dismissed as emotional or dramatic when they felt something was wrong but couldn't yet prove it. The next morning, David tried again to talk, his voice careful, like he was stepping around something fragile. He said his mother didn't mean it the way it came out, that she grew up differently, that she believed family problems should be handled quietly. He asked me if I could see it from her perspective. I looked at him and realized that was exactly the problem. Everyone had been seeing it from her perspective. No one had stopped to ask what it felt like to be me, to carry a child, to give birth, to bleed and ache and doubt yourself, only to have your integrity tested in secret. I asked David if he would have been okay with my father doing the same thing behind his back. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Over the next few days, I became acutely aware of how often mothers are expected to surrender pieces of themselves in the name of harmony, to smooth things over, to be the bigger person, to accept apologies that never actually acknowledge harm. I felt the weight of that expectation pressing on me, subtle but relentless. And still, every time Oliver laughed, every time he reached for me, I felt grounded again. Whatever uncertainty existed between adults, he was certain. He trusted me completely. That trust felt sacred now, something I was responsible for protecting, even if it meant being seen as difficult, ungrateful, or cold. When the lawyer explained my options in a calm, neutral voice, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I wanted to escalate, but because knowledge restored balance. Because understanding the rules meant I was no longer operating in the dark. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing.